Hi everyone, and welcome back to Octopus Builds, where we are building out the Trident project for the fictional company Octopet Shop. My name is Bob Walker, and I'm a technical director over here at Octopus Deploy. And today we are going to be talking about build server integration. But before we do that, I kind of want to get you up to date as to what has happened since the last recording. What have I done off camera? A couple of things I've done. The first thing I did is I cleaned up my channels. I've cleaned up some releases. So we are back to just 2 channels, which is default and release. Because this is just a sample application, this isn't a real world application, I can have no problem going into releases, deleting all of the old releases, and then going into channels and deleting all the channels. So I got that cleaned up. Now, if you recall, at the very end, I was running into a fun problem with UTC time zone conversions, everything along those lines. The way that I resolved it is I have made a change to the run a runbook step. So this is where we were running into problems at the last video, which was we wanted to call this update time. We wanted to call this for some time in the future because we wanted to do verification or whatever the case may be. Now, the problem that we ran into is because it was UTC time, I had to put in 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. UTC time, which is 11 p.m. my time. Now, I could have cheesed the system and said, you know what, it's actually okay, deploy at 2100 hours, whatever the case may be. But I wanted to make this as real world as possible. So what I have done is I've made an update to that step template so you can actually pass in tomorrow 0400 or tomorrow 0300 or tomorrow 6, whatever the case may be. What will happen is the step will see that you sent in the word tomorrow. It can be uppercase or lowercase, and then it will remove that, parse this, and then whatever date that you've provided, it will add 1 day onto it. So I figured that was probably the easiest way to do it, absence of everything else or writing some sort of custom script. One other thing that I did is I realized that it was a little crazy to wait until tomorrow at 3 a.m. to update the staging load balancer. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I have updated my project variables to now have project.loadbalancer.update time, where it's a prompted variable for production, but I'm just passing in NA for staging, meaning that it's going to kick it off right away. We're not going to wait around for it. I did make one tiny tweak to the runbook, which is now the process. So I've updated the process to first verify the staged application, then update the load balancer, and then if anything fails, then we want to notify when this happens. I figured that this is something that would be very realistic, that you'd have some sort of verify process included within the runbook itself, just to make sure that, hey, the staged application is up and running. I'm not about to swap over and cause all kinds of heck to the users or anything along those lines. So, yeah, we got it up to date. I'm going to publish this just to make sure that we are good to go. And publish. Yep. Awesome. So this is where we are at today. Now, up until this point, I have been providing you packages that you can deploy yourself, and we've been uploading them manually up into this library. Now, you might be noticing that I have some new packages up here that I haven't been providing, and the version numbers look a little interesting compared to what we've had in the past. That is because the dev team has finally completed their build server integration. Now, in the real world, this would probably be one of the very first things that you would do. However, for this particular video series, my focus was primarily on discussing different use cases within Octopus Deploy, building out the deployment process to, if you recall, we started out with a simple hello world step, and now take a look at our process. I mean, it's a legitimate process. This is something that we would actually have. My goal was to build this out first so you could see it happen without muddying the waters to include build server integration and everything along those lines. My big focus was just on Octopus Deploy. But we have the build server integration complete. And what I decided to do was leverage GitHub Actions. So if you're not familiar with GitHub Actions, they are a relatively new feature, and new in terms of released in the last few years, as opposed to some of the pre-existing CI servers that have been out there for quite some time, such as Jenkins, TeamCity, Azure DevOps builds. So this is the new. This is becoming fast and this is very quickly becoming a very popular CI server, and I wanted to kind of walk you through what I did. Now, I didn't want to build out everything in front of you because, unlike with Octopus Deploy, where it is, it's a UI, we can slowly build out other things. It's a bit more involved, specifically around the fact that we have our life cycles set up where we deploy to dev and QA for our future branches. And then once everything gets merged into main, that's when it gets into the release pipeline. And that's when we go out to staging and production. So it's a bit more involved than typical. In addition, it is also not a UI. So it's kind of hard to follow around. You'd see me just typing out a bunch of scripts. No one really wants to see something like that. I can't imagine that makes for a very compelling video, nor does anyone want to see me stumble in writing some PowerShell. That's not a very compelling video either. So what I've done is instead I will provide you with the source code in the repository, the Octopus Builds repository, as well as this build, so you can take a look at how it works. So how this works within GitHub Actions is you provide a YAML file. It could be .yaml or .yml. That's known as YAML. It's actually a self-referentiating description. YAML stands for YAML ain't a markup language. Isn't that great? So how it works. With a build server, what you're going to run into is there's going to be generally at least 3 steps that you're going to need. You're going to need a build step, then a package step, and then a push step. I've also included a create release step. And so let's walk through each of those steps, and then you can kind of see it how it works in action. So what it is I'm going to skip over this bit initially because it'll make sense in just a bit. So what we need to do first is we need to build the website. That's what this step is doing. Then we need to package this website into an artifact or a zip file that Octopus Deploy can then consume and then push out to the deployment targets. Now you might be wondering, why do we need to package this application into a zip file? And that's because we need to we only want to transfer a single file to the deployment target itself. And that's where it can get very complex if you say, I want you to take all of these files that we have, because a website, if I were to download this and I were to extract it, it is quite intense. The number of files that are in here is numbers in the hundreds. So we would have to have this whole process. It just is much, much easier to have just a single zip file. Now, other application types, such as Java, they already create an artifact, such as a jar file. And so you just have to pass around that jar file. Happy days for that. But with .NET, you need to package it up in a zip file. So that's what we're doing here. And then we do the same thing for the database. We build the database, and this is just creating the database project. And then we're packaging up the database. And so unlike the website is source code. And so I'll show you what that means right now. Let's go back. The website itself is comprised of source code, .NET source code. So if I were to click into these various folders, I would see .NET code. And in case you're ever wondering as to how I would write an application, this is probably a fair representation of how I'd write something. But then we also have another project called Database. Now, the database is leveraging a tool called DBUp, and I'll include a link to that so you can kind of get an understanding of what DBUp is. But what this does is it contains all of the SQL scripts needed to basically create a database, a working database for the application to run. So it includes scripts such as create table, create space table. But what dbup provides is the capability where it can look at the list of scripts. So we have 10 scripts in this particular case, and go, of these 10 scripts, which have not been run on the database. And so, the first time this ever runs, and as it's going out to a database, it'll say, oh, I need to run all 10 of these scripts. The next time that it runs, it goes, oh, I've already run these 10 scripts. I don't need to rerun them again and again. So as people are building out these applications, what they're doing is they will be adding in additional scripts as you add in new functionality. So you might create a new table, you might add a column to a table, whatever the case may be. So this is why we're quote unquote building the database. What we're doing is we're packaging up these scripts and then creating a file, basically a file that we can run that will handle all of the script management for us. Very high level overview of what dbup does. Well, let's jump back into the workflow. So we build in the website, we package the website, build the database, package the database. And then what we're going to do here is we are pushing the packages up to Octopus Deploy. And we provide it with an API key because you need that, as well as the server that we're going to deploy to and the space that we need to push it up. Then we tell it which packages to push up. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and create and deploy the release automatically for us. And in this case, we're going to deploy it to a specific tenant. And all of that is defined. So you see these env, env, env. If we were to scroll back up to the top of this file, you would see that project name, Trident. Tenant name, internal. Space name, Octopus Builds. We also have secrets, such as the API key. Now, this is something that you want. You do not want to check in the secrets, such as the API key, directly into source control. That is a massive security hole and would cause nothing but heartache. So GitHub is very smart. They're run by very smart people. They know that's not a good idea. And so we have a repository secret that I've created called Octopus Server API Key. I also put the URL in there. That way this script can be a little bit more portable for you. That's not really a secret. I could tell you the URL all day long, but I put it as a secret just to make it a little bit easier on myself. But the API key is a secret. In fact, I can't see this API key in the UI once it's been set. Now, there's a bit more to our process that we've put together that we need to know. Specifically, what channel, what environment, and the release number and the package version to do. Because if you recall, if we come back here, we have 2 channels, and we also have different tenants. And the channels have different version rules, if you recall. We have the requirement where you have to have a pre-release tag, such as blue-green. But when we're going to release, we can't have a pre-release tag. That means it is ready to go. So when we're doing our feature branch work, we want to have this rule followed, and we need to go to the default channel. However, when we are ready to go to production, we want to go to the release channel. I am a big fan of not having multiple deployment processes with ostensibly the exact same work. That is very confusing and much more difficult to maintain. Now, after seeing what I'm about to show you, you might argue that this is harder to maintain. So, fair enough. So I skipped over this step previously called Get Octopus Information. And what this is doing is it's doing a couple of things. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to pull the version from the project itself. So let's jump back over here, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Because we need to have a version 3.0.0, 3.1.0.8, whatever the case may be. We need to have something to, this is the unique version. This is, whatever is the unique item that we're about to push out. And typically, this is going to be set at the project level. You're not going to be I don't really like the idea of coming up with something outside of the project, because developers themselves, when you're talking to development teams, they're working within their not source control environment, their integrated studio, such as Visual Studio or VS Code. They're using that particular tool. They don't want to have to jump around to a bunch of different things. And so what I've done is I've put the version prefix, in this case it's 3.1.0, into this file called octopus.trident.web.csproj. So what it's doing here is it is reading that version. In addition to that, I know the branch name that I'm currently working on. And so what it will do is it will basically say, I'm going to assume that I'm on the main branch. And so I'm going to set the channel name to be the release channel, which is provided. It's called release. I'm going to assume the deployment environment that I want to push to is going to be staging. And then I'm going to set the version number, the unique version number for each of these runs, to be the version prefix. So that is 3.1.0 plus the GitHub run number. So that's going to create my version number. That's why when you come here and you see 3.1.0.8, that is why it has that .8, because that represents the number of runs that I've done so far with this build. Now, if I'm not on the main branch, or if you're on a legacy repository, it uses the term master. I prefer main. Most people do these days. I think master was just a holdover from a previous time. And so if I'm not on main, meaning I'm on a feature branch, then I'm going to be using the feature branch settings instead. So now I'm going to change the channel name to the feature branch channel, which is default. And then I'm going to change the environment name to development. So I want to deploy to development. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to append upon the version number. So previously the version number is 3.1.0.8. I am going to add on the branch name that I've filtered. So this is what this whole blob of stuff is doing, is it's filtering everything out, and it's basically saying replace feature with empty, replace bug fix, and so this is how it kind of determines if I'm on main or if I'm on master. And then what I do here is it's setting some output variables. Now, if you recall from Octopus Deploy, we've set some output variables in our process when we were doing our whole rollbacks set of videos. So here I'm calculating the deployment mode. I set a bunch of variables, which will then skip steps 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 if I am doing a rollback or a redeploy. This only runs if I'm doing a deployment. That same concept, so where we can come in here and we are doing a run condition where we're using an output variable, that same concept is applied here. I'm setting an output variable to the channel name, I'm setting the version number, and I'm setting the environment. And then that version number is then used when I am packaging up the website, as well as when I am building the website. Same thing when I am building the database and packaging the database. I'm still using that version number. I then also pass in that version number so it knows which packages to push up. And that version number is my release number as well as my package version. I then also use the output variable, Octopus environment, Octopus channel, to be channel and what I'm going to be deploying to. So that's how it all kind of works together. A lot of similarities between these two, a lot of similar concepts, but it's just a difference in responsibility. The CI server, such as this, it has access to the Git repository. It knows about different branches. It also has different pieces of functionality, such as the ability to run unit tests and keep track of the the results and kind of see history of time. Very common with CI servers. Also, run some analysis on your code to make sure that the code is compliant with your set of rules. That's also very common with the CI servers. So CI servers perform a very valuable function, but they shouldn't be used for deployments because they weren't built from the ground up to handle deployments. They don't have a lot of these very complex items such as what we're doing here, where we need to pause the deployment and wait for an approval, where we need to build these artifacts to review, call a runbook to do something else. You could, with enough elbow grease and enough gumption, you can absolutely have your CI server do that. But again, it's very similar to not using the right tool for the right job. I'm a big believer in using the right tool for the right job. GitHub Actions is a fantastic tool, but at the same time, you don't use a hammer as a screwdriver, and you don't use a screwdriver as a hammer. You use the right tool for the right job. So let's go ahead and we can go ahead and kick this off, because what this is doing is I've provided these two things. So what it's doing is it's monitoring any branch that starts with feature or bug fix, and it's also monitoring what they call workflow dispatch. And what this does is it allows us to trigger this workflow from the UI. So we can see right here, this workflow has a workflow dispatch event trigger, so I can go ahead and I can run this workflow. And I have tempted fate by doing this demo live. Let's see if we can get this up and running. Or did my internet just take a big old... No. There we go. And I can even select the branch that I want to run from. I only have one branch right now, so I'm just going to run from main. I must imagine clicking on... Oh, there it goes. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I clicked on that. So when it's all said and done, this is number 9. When we finish up here, we should see 3.1.0.9 deployed to staging. And it typically goes pretty fast because my build is not doing a whole lot. It's just grabbing a bunch of things, and now we can see the logs. We can see the prefix number 3.1.0 like we expected. The branch name is main. Channel name is release, going to staging. That's the version number, and that's what we've done. And so the next step is it's going to go ahead and build and push the application. It has to do a few additional things while we're waiting here. Because this is a .NET application, I wanted to make sure that we had the latest version. This is a .NET 6 application. Make sure I have the latest version of .NET installed. Install the Octopus Deploy CLI. This is to handle the packing piece of this. Restore the dependencies. This is common build stuff. So now we're into like the build area. And so we're building the website, and then it's packaging up the website. We can see it's doing that. It's building the database. And then it's packaging up the database, and it's pushing those packages up to Octopus. So if we come into the library, we can see 3.1.09 has now been pushed up there. Come back here, and now we see 3.1.09 is now deploying. It is finished up running. Sometimes for some folks, what they prefer to do is wait until the deployment has been completed before finishing up the CI run, because sometimes what they like to, what I have seen folks like to do is either push to the next environment right away. This isn't a very good example where you would go from staging to production right away. That'd not be a good idea. But maybe they want to go from dev to QA right away, or maybe they want to run some sanity checks via the CI server. Maybe they want to keep all of that within their CI server. There's no wrong way to do it. My preference is to kind of fire and forget because it's pretty quick at that particular point in time. But yeah, as you can see, we ran everything in a little under a minute. So it's this has not been a very type-heavy type of video, but hopefully you found some usage of it. All of the source code, everything is up there in the Octopus Builds GitHub repository. If you want to fork it down, you want to copy it into your own personal repository, give it a chance to play around with it a little bit more. Well, before I sign off, this is Future Bob. As he's editing the videos, he realized he forgot something to include in the previous video. So I talked a little bit about the API key that I provide to GitHub, that I store inside of GitHub, but I never talk about the user that it's assigned to. What I did is I came in here and I created a brand new service account user called GitHub Action Octopus Builds. I gave it an API key, and this is the API key that I have saved into my GitHub Actions repository. The other thing I did is I created a brand new team called Build Server, assigned it the user, GitHub Action Octopus Builds, and I assigned it the user role Build Server. So this user role, it has permissions. Let's view the selected. To push packages, create deployments, view the environments, view the feeds, view the library of variable sets. Lots of views, create releases, view releases, run runbooks, do anything else along those lines. But everything that you'll need to push up a package, create a release, and deploy it. So this is the user that I am using for my pushes. And in fact, if we were to come into the most recent deployment, you could see that it was GitHub Action Octopus Build. So it's a brand new service account that I create. This is something that I recommend for anyone who is interested in using build server integrations with Octopus Deploy, is to create a unique service account. I typically prefer a unique service account per build technology or a unique service account per space. You can even go as fine-grained as having maybe a unique service account per application or per application group, but that can expand quite rapidly in terms of who can do what, when, where, and why. Why someone would want to have a unique account per, say, space or per application group, it's more for a security reason. So if that API key were to ever get compromised, the worst it could do is just damage that one application, not anything else. So again, it is completely up to you as to how you want to do it, but hopefully, again, you found this episode useful of how to set up build server integration. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.